Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Risk with Dr. Naveen Agarwal. Each week, we talk about a topic related to risk management of medical devices in a very casual and informal way. This is not a webinar or lecture. Rather, our goal is to talk about key topics and challenges in a very informal way and share best practices. I'm your host, Naveen Agarwal, and I'm the principal and founder at Achieve, where my personal mission is to help you achieve success in risk management. My guest in this episode is Becki Hiebert. She has many years of industry experience in a quality regulatory role in small companies and startup environments. In this conversation, we are focusing on some best practices and challenges when trying to implement a quality management system and a risk management process in these environments, and combining it with your design control process. We had this discussion in front of a live audience as part of our weekly LinkedIn live audio series. You're about to hear a recording of our conversation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our weekly Let's Talk Risk conversation. I'm excited to see all of you today. Guys, today we're going to have a very interesting conversation, and it'll be very interesting to you, especially if you are working in a small company environment or a startup environment, because that's where we sometimes find a lot of challenges when we are trying to implement something. And my guest today, Becki Hiebert, has a lot of experience in this area. Becki has been on this show before, so it's very awesome for me to welcome her once again. And I'm sure you will enjoy this conversation because it's going to be very casual and informal. Guys, it's not a webinar or a lecture. We don't go too deep in anything, but we want to have just some casual and informal conversations. So we've got to talk about what it takes to actually practice in a small company or a small startup environment. We are doing too many things at the same time, and I'm sure Becki will have some very interesting perspective to share with us. So with that, Becki, welcome once again, and please just introduce yourself a little bit to our audience today.
Hi, Naveen. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here again. Happy Friday. I am Becki Hiebert. Like Naveen said, I help startups and small companies get their quality management systems in place and get design controls and risk management off the ground and up and running and all that good stuff. I started my career way back as a chemist on the bench doing R&D chemistry, and eventually realized that was not for me and got the chance to move into QA. And I found my home, and I've been here ever since. I've had a fairly varied experience in terms of my QA QMS work. I started at a large global pharma company that had lots and lots of good practices and a really strong quality culture. And I assumed that was kind of the standard everywhere. So when I left and transitioned to working with medical device startups, I was in for a bit of a shock because not every company operates like a mature 30-year-old global organization. Mm-hmm. Which seems kind of basic and obvious, but it was a lesson that I had to learn. And so, yeah, these days I work with small startups and early stage companies. So I think the smallest one I've worked with was 10 people, and the largest was around 30 or 35.
Okay.
All either trying to get product to market or in those first few years of having product on the market. And I help them set up their quality management system, take teams through design controls and risk, remediate existing problems, just kind of help wherever I can from a quality and regulatory perspective.
So you're probably in a situation where you are the only person in the quality and regulatory function, right?
Yep. I've been a team of one a number of times.
So how does that feel? How does it feel like to be like the only one and having to do everything while also, helping the product to launch?
Yeah, it's fun. there's a lot of pressure on you because you don't really have a team of other QA regulatory people to rely on. It can be very, very isolating and very lonely. But that's where having a network of people outside of the company is really important. And it's also really, really freeing because you get to make all the decisions about what your QMS and all of the processes in it will look like. You don't necessarily have to come to a consensus with your team or even other people in the company, though that's not necessarily the right move. But you get a lot of independence. You get to make a lot of those decisions about what your QMS looks like.
A lot of responsibility at the same time, right?
Yes.
So guys,
yes,
I think
like it's all on your shoulders.
Yeah. So guys, I think a lot of you may be able to relate to this because you may be in a small company or a startup environment. And let me know using the emoji icon, if you are in that environment, use a thumbs up or whatever, Christy, you are sharing with us. Please try to, have this sort of indirect conversation with us during this part. But in a little bit, I will start inviting you to share your thoughts as well. So Becki, let's jump right into it. Today, we want to talk about some practical examples of, how to go about even starting a risk management activity. Let's focus on that. Maybe you can give us an example of a product that you have worked with, and in that context, what it is that you did when you were starting out.
Yeah, so one of the most recent products that I've worked with, it's an ophthalmic imaging and treatment device for those who are suffering from floaters in their vision. And so that was another case where I was the team of one. And I had been brought in to help take the team through the design control and risk management process, and get all the documentation and all of that good stuff. So the first thing I do whenever I'm starting design controls or risk is I make sure that the intended use and the indications for use of the device are as nailed down as they can be at that point, recognizing that, and this was the case for this product as well. It was still being developed. It was still going through that design and development process. So the intended use, indications for use, there could be some changes, especially because we were planning some clinical studies as well. And so the first thing I do is I really want to get that nailed down, because without knowing what your device does and on whom the device is supposed to be used, in what kind of setting, all of those details, those play a big part in the potential hazards and harms that the users of your device will experience.
Yeah.
That's kind of the key starting point for me, is hammering out, what does this device do, where, on whom, who interacts with it. That's the starting point.
Got you.
Once I've got, sorry, go ahead.
No, please continue.
Okay. Once I've got that nailed down, then I like to get more into the meat of the risk analysis. And I really like the way that ISO 14971 breaks down the risk analysis into kind of four main parts. There's the intended use and reasonably foreseeable misuse, those characteristics related to safety, that long list of questions, and then identifying the hazards and hazardous situations, and then the risk. So we already talked about intended use and indications for use. From that, you can already start to get a sense of what the reasonably foreseeable misuses are. And this is where it starts becoming important to get someone with actual clinical or medical experience with the device and with the use scenarios on your team, because your technical folks, your product development teams, they'll be able to tell you what could happen when things go wrong with the device itself, but not necessarily how the device could be misused in the settings where it is going to be used by those users.
Yeah.
So what? Yeah, then we take a look at that. That's usually a brainstorming exercise, and depending on the device, maybe you don't need someone with a whole lot of clinical or medical experience. If it's a fairly simple device, maybe you and the product development team can do the brainstorming on your own. But for something as complicated as, an ophthalmic device that's using lasers to treat floaters in people's eyes, you probably want someone with some medical experience on your risk team. Then I like to go to that second group, which is that huge, long list of questions in one of the annexes of the risk standard. All of these characteristics related to safety that really get you thinking about all of the different aspects of your device. Does it have cybersecurity concerns? Is there biocompatibility? Is there sterile components? Is it implantable? All of these things that make you think about the device in a way that's different from just a pure technology development standpoint. And typically what I do when answering those questions is I will take a first pass, because I recognize I'm being brought into the team as sort of the expert in this scenario. So I don't just give the questions to the product development team and let them go to town. I like to take a first pass, do as much as I can, and then kind of limit their involvement to reviewing what I've done and brainstorming and helping me answer the questions where I'm not sure or just have no idea. And that's partly to not overwhelm them with the risk process, partly to be respectful of their time so that they can continue developing the product. But then also to just kind of give them a nice little introduction to, okay, here's what part of the risk management process looks like. Here are some of the things you need to think about.
So Becki, for that, I'm thinking that you may have to do a little bit of pre-work to understand some of the technology behind the device, how it's supposed to work. You may not be a technical person, but it requires a little bit of pre-work on your part. But what I'm hearing you say is that you are actually creating the first pass so that the team doesn't have to start from scratch, which is a very important point. In this area, Becki, I had a specific question for you. Are you doing all this work before design inputs have been finalized? How does it link to the design and development timeline? At what point do you do this?
So I like to start with the risk right around the same time that I start with design and development. So if we're following the 13485 standard, one of the outputs from risk management is part of design inputs. So there needs to be a little bit of overlap in that sense. But no, I don't wait until the design inputs are done or started or anything to start the risk. As soon as time and bandwidth allows, I start both of them, because you want your team to be thinking about risks during as much of the product development timeline as possible, because risks can arise at any point in product development. So if you're leaving it closer till the end, there's just a bigger chance that you'll forget things.
Great. So Becki, in the example that you have started with on this device that's supposed to treat floaters, which, by the way, I've worked in the ophthalmology area and I'm pretty familiar with this. So it's very fascinating for me that you have been involved in this. And guys, this is interesting because, I didn't know this about Becki. And this is the fun for these conversations, which are not planned. They're not scripted. And we're learning as we go. So Becki, in this context, can you share an example of, from a risk management point of view, something that worked really well for you and something that didn't go as well as you had planned?
Yeah, so something that worked really well, I found, was separating out cybersecurity from the rest of this device in terms of kind of thinking about risk and especially answering the questions related to safety and the next step of the hazards and the hazardous situations.
Okay.
This device was was and is really complicated. You've got various pieces of hardware, you've got various pieces of software. There was some AI ML. There was the fact that what we were actually designing was going to be used originally in clinical studies. So there's even a little bit more of an unknown aspect because it had never actually been used in people before.
Yeah.
And the fact that that the clinical study was going to be done out of country. So the data wasn't even going to originally be collected and gathered in Canada. So cybersecurity was a fairly big concern, and to make sure that we treated it adequately, I decided it would still be documented as part of the risk management file. And I eventually merged, even with the hazard trace matrix, I did put everything together. But the actual process of getting those cybersecurity risks, I sat down with the cybersecurity folks, and we just focused solely on that cybersecurity, because it was just such it was such an all-encompassing thing that to have the other product team leads there would have, one, been distracting for cybersecurity, and two, wouldn't have added a lot of value for the other teams. And I think that's maybe a little bit of a counterintuitive suggestion, because risk management, for the most part, should be a very collaborative team activity. You don't necessarily want to do it piecewise, but I think you need to look at your device as a whole system, including the environment that it operates in. And maybe in some cases, it makes sense to do it in a more piecewise approach, as opposed to looking at everything all at once with the whole team all the time.
But you are eventually merging the two anyway, so
yes,
you're not losing it. Now, how about something that didn't go as well as you had thought, and what were some of the things that you did to correct that?
Yeah. So something that didn't go as well as I wanted it to. This feels like a bit of a cop-out answer, but it's the whole documentation of the risk management process. I'm still finding that it's very, very clunky, very time-consuming, and it doesn't feel like it's a very good use of my time all the time, even though, of course, it's necessary to get all of this documented and organized and all of that. But doing the documentation in a way that that actually facilitates the team going through the process as well took me a very long time to figure out. And with this ophthalmic device here that we're talking about, I tried something new for the first time that I think I'm going to keep trying again. And it's all still in Excel, unfortunately. I haven't found a better solution than that. But rather than just splitting it up by analysis, and essentially just having the hazard trace matrix as my main document, I like having separate tabs for each of the risk analysis kind of steps, the intended use, the characteristics, the hazards, and the harms, just to make it more of a process, stepwise approach, because getting that list together is really overwhelming and really intimidating.
So Becki, don't feel bad, because Excel, can work. And I have personal experience implementing an Excel-based risk management file for a $4 billion business. That was that was supported by 3 people working part-time. So
that is amazing.
Thank
you for sharing that. That makes me feel better.
Yes. So the trick here is to be able to link one table with another. And that is where we have a difficulty and challenge with Excel, but I think it can be done. And your point about creating a trace matrix at the end, which is the master sort of a view, an overall view of your entire risk management activities, is the key point. So I'm sure we'll probably have some questions and discussions around documentation from our audience. So guys, let me open the floor for discussion here. I'm going to start inviting you. Please raise your hand. I'm going to bring you here on our virtual stage. Don't hold back. This is just a very casual conversation. And while I wait for that, I'm just going to keep going with Becki, but the floor is open. So please make sure that you indicate your interest in attending, in joining me. So let's see, Roger, you are requesting to speak. Hopefully I can bring you up. So, and guys, don't wait your turn. Raise your hand now and I can bring more people at the same time. Roger, looks like you're on. So please share what you have in mind.
Just a comment. And I've got a lot of experience in medical device product development. I can see what Becki is talking about, especially with new startups. I just wanted to comment in the small company I work at, it's purposely populated by people with lots and lots and lots of experience, but there's still just a handful of people. So the trap I see us falling into sometimes is we know so much, or I should say we think we know so much, we tend to go very quickly, especially when assessing risk in documenting some of these things. Mm-hmm. It's the flip side of the coin. When you're a new startup and not much experience, you tend to not know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And I'm just saying that you can have a group of people who know so much, they don't take the time to do that deep thinking and find themselves maybe skipping some things.
Yeah, so it's
just
like
a comment.
Sure, I think it's like groupthink, right? You can
Exactly.
fall into the trap of groupthink, and someone has to kind of raise the hand and say, are we ignoring something, or this is something we might be missing? Becki, did you ever come across that situation in your experience?
Yes, that's a really good point, Roger. I'm really glad you brought that up. I've run across that as a new person joining companies, trying to read documents and understand what has been done, what decisions were made, and why. And I think Roger's absolutely right. You get these people who are so used to working together, almost to the point where they can read each other's minds because they're just working that closely and they're sharing the same base of knowledge. And then you bring someone new into the team, either as a permanent member or maybe it's somebody outside the team doing an audit. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, well, everyone internal to the company can understand what we mean by this document, but somebody who's external, mm-hmm. who doesn't have this sort of hive mind that the rest of us do, it's harder for them to understand because some of those contextual details are lacking.
But here's what I'm thinking, though. If you're a new person, speak up and ask questions even if you don't understand, because those questions actually may spark a discussion among the more seasoned members and say, oh, guys, we never looked at it that way. That's an interesting
Absolutely.
point. So,
and it's all about coming from a perspective of wanting to understand and wanting to keep the patient safe. It's not a judgment on the quality of the work or the quality of the team or the quality of the product.
Absolutely. So guys, again, I invite you to participate in this conversation. Share what you have experienced. If you have been in a startup or a small company environment trying to do it on your own, share with us. Prashant, you are on, so please unmute your mic and share what you have in mind.
Yeah, hello to all.
Hi.
My question is like a risk category, like a strategic, operational, compliance, financial, environmental, social, and some cybersecurity. Which is most difficult to handle or during risk assessment?
Mm-hmm. Okay, Prashant, are you asking in terms of a general question or particularly in a small startup environment?
A small startup environment. And second one is, does the risk assessment is depend on the region very differ from region to region?
You mean, let's say under FDA or European regulations or... Okay.
Compliance point of view.
Okay. Becki, I'm going to invite you first, and Roger, I'll also ask you to share your thoughts. What do you think, Becki, about this question?
Yeah, for sure. Really good question, Prashant. Thanks for asking. I'll answer your second question first. In terms of the regions, my experience is largely limited to the U.S. and Canada, with a little bit of the EU in terms of the MDR. And so for me, 14971 is my go-to for risk management. That's kind of my my Bible. I will, of course, look at the regulations to make sure that Canada or the U.S. doesn't require or suggest anything else in addition to 14971. But that's always my starting point. That's my go-to. In terms of which categories of risk are the kind of the trickiest to deal with as a startup, that is a really interesting question. I would say it depends a lot on the device that you're developing and what kind of competencies you have in your team already. In general, I would probably say cybersecurity is probably the trickiest, simply because it's kind of the newest one that regulators are putting a lot of focus and attention on.
Okay.
We saw FDA, I think it was last year, there was a lot of action around new cybersecurity laws and guidance documents. And, we have our cybersecurity SBOM requirements now.
Yeah.
So I think from that perspective, cybersecurity is probably the newest, trickiest one. But really, there's also the idea that whatever competencies your team is the weakest on,
Yes.
those will also be the hardest, because you just don't have that internal experience and knowledge in the same way that you do for other aspects of your product.
Awesome. Roger, do you have anything to add to that?
I would really agree with what Becki said. In my experience, the philosophy of the risk assessment for different regions is pretty much the same. And again, as she said, there might be a few nuances that a particular country may want more focus on, but in general, it was never perceived as a problem.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say, and even though I go work as a consultant, I could certainly see that with a small company, a small startup who's maybe the core of what they're working on is a new technology, I can certainly see they should be the experts in that. And kind of as Becki said, don't hesitate to go get experts in the related fields that you don't have the internal expertise to handle. I could see a company stumbling and failing, trying to do everything themselves.
For sure. Thank you, Roger. Emmanuel, you have joined us, so please unmute your mic and share what you have in mind.
Hello, Naveen. Thank you, everyone. I just wanted to say that first, I'd like to agree with everyone that just spoke, both Becki and Roger. And I also wanted to add that you have to be careful about your classifications. For example, in the United States, you could be classified as a 2A. In Canada, you could be 2B. And in Europe, you could even be a class 3. Each region also classifies the device depending on the risk. So when you are working on your development, you need someone that understands the regional regulations and how your potential device can be classified.
And I guess that's where I will draw the link between what Becki was saying, work on the intended use and indication right up front.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm actually working with a client right now. Their device is class 1 in Canada and the US, and they want to add a feature that will bump them to class 2 in Canada, but still keep them as class 1 in the US. So that's been a fun, kind of interesting situation to navigate.
Great, guys. So with that, I think we will try to wrap up soon because we are running against the clock here, guys. Becki, I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to collect your thoughts and share with us 2 or 3 key bullet points we can remember. But in the meantime, guys, I want to share with you only a few announcements. Number 1 is that next week I'm giving a webinar. This is going to be a webinar. It's actually a benefit for some of my subscribers to the Let's Talk Risk newsletter. This is going to be about how to use standardized codes and terms to build a master harms list. if you're interested in attending, just reach out to me and I'll send you the information for registration. And second, and very quick announcement, to remind you that we meet every Friday at 11 Eastern. So you can put this on your calendar if you like it, so you don't have to wait for any announcements. And if you miss one of these sessions, the recordings are available on my Let's Talk Risk website. You have a link here in the event page, the first link where you can go and subscribe and listen to those recordings. With that, Becki, I want to invite you to share just a few key points or any closing thoughts you have.
Yeah, thanks, Naveen. I think I would sum up today's session by saying you need to not just jump into the risk management activities. There's a lot of planning and a lot of work that goes up front, not just in terms of writing the risk management plan, but in really thinking about what is your device, what does it do, on whom, by whom, in what kind of environment, and what is the system of your device? Is it standalone? Is it connected to anything? Is it part of a hospital network? Is it being used by somebody on their home Wi-Fi? Really take the time, just like we do in design and development. We don't jump in to start writing inputs and user needs. We think about what do we want to accomplish here? What is the device that we're working on? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? So really taking that time up front to plan and think about what you're going to do before just diving in. And then the second, I think, would be to make sure that your team is comprehensive and competent, that you have people either internal or external covering all the different areas of expertise that your product touches or is involved in. Because ultimately, you as the medical device manufacturer, you are responsible for the safety of your device and for the safety of the patients that use it and interact with it. So if you don't have all of the expertise that you need in-house, it's up to you to identify and go find those missing pieces.
Perfect. Thank you, Becki. What a wonderful conversation we had today, guys. Thanks for attending. And thank you, Becki, for sharing your insights once again. Prashant, Roger, and Dr. Tukaj, thanks again for being a part of this discussion. And that's what makes these conversations special, that we are talking with each other, learning from each other, and it's not a one-way lecture or a webinar. So I hope you enjoy this and will continue sharing your thoughts, participating in these discussions. Show up next week because once again, we will have a very, very interesting conversation about communication and collaboration for career success in a QA/RA role. I think you don't want to miss that one. It's going to be a great, great conversation. Guys, with that, thank you everyone again and have a good weekend. We will connect once again next week. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Naveen. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.